From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. I hope you're aware of National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, NSPM 7. You and I have talked about it a couple times. It's worth a reminder or two because there are things going on in the news today as we speak that we need to be aware of. There's a trial happening right now where they're implementing some of the ideas in NSPM 7. Of course, camps are still being built, warehouses still being bought. They've had some trouble with that, and that's good. It always pays for the public to be aware, for the people to let their local and state representatives know that they know about these issues. So the whole camp story, I'm not sure where that stands right now. I don't want to get ahead of myself. The last you and I talked about it, they were feverishly buying up warehouses and feverishly building. But I think that's slowed down a little bit, again, thanks to public awareness. Activists are still very much in the sights of these policies. And lately I've seen some headlines about denaturalization. Just one of many ideas that go back to Project 2025. Not only do they want to deport immigrants they consider illegal, they want to find naturalized citizens and find some excuse to denaturalize, take away their citizenship. So I want to talk about some of these things over the next couple of segments here. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, let's, just by way of a reminder, National Security Presidential Memorandum Number 7, NSPM 7. It was signed in September of 2025. It provides a broad framework for basically cleansing the country of anyone they consider unwanted. The memorandum identifies anti-capitalism as one of the common threads supposedly animating domestic terrorism and political violence. I am devoutly anti-capitalist, so I am, by definition, according to the regime, a terrorist. Well, I guess I'm not a terrorist unless I do something about it. I guess if I stole a candy bar in the name of anti-capitalism, then they could officially label me as a terrorist and deal with me accordingly. NSPM 7 also cites the 2024 assassination of that United Healthcare executive by Luigi Mangione. Uses that as a warning sign, an indicator that these threats to the nation are on the rise. The memo directs the full force of the federal regime, including the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Forces, the Justice Department, DHS, Treasury Department, IRS, all encouraged in the investigation and prosecution of any such alleged threats. And then a few months later, in December of last year, the memo took on some new life as a directive from the Attorney General, charging these agencies to treat domestic terrorism and organized political violence as a coordinated government-wide enforcement priority, with a focus on investigations, prosecutions, and disruption of supporting networks. So this is declared war on political enemies. It instructs federal law enforcement to refer any encounter or suspicion of domestic terrorism to the Joint Terrorism Task Forces for a full investigation. They're building an entire infrastructure here of oppression and suppression. Anything they think they can define as rioting, looting, doxing, swatting. Now, like many of their initiatives, the most brazen example being voter fraud. Voter fraud, of course, doesn't exist, except in the 0.0000 something percentage. So they invent a problem that doesn't exist to further their agenda. So this is a perfect example of that. So yeah, this memo is way more than just words on a page. These are directives across the wide range of federal law enforcement. Civil liberties groups, of course, have argued that the whole framework is so broad that it just sweeps everybody up. Nonprofits, activists, donors, they can label anybody an extremist, a radical, a terrorist. Now you might say all of this sounds unconstitutional, and of course it is. They do what they want to do. They expect it to go to the courts. I think half the time they even expect to lose. They don't care. Now, in addition to the courts, we also have local and state governments. They can protect nonprofits, tax-exempt groups. They can end or at least limit their participation with the federal joint task forces. The Constitution clearly states that state law enforcement cannot be commandeered by federal authorities. That's foundational. And some will say, and it took me a while to understand this, it was never just about immigration. Although there's plenty of evidence that racism is rife in MAGA, I'm sure for many of them the racism is plenty. But for the Stephen Miller Russell Vogt regime and the blueprint of Project 2025, mass deportation is just the opening move. You really think they need hundreds of camps across the country holding tens and tens of thousands of people? No, it's about undesirables. It's about political opponents. It's about LGBTQ. It's about socialists or anybody they want to label as a socialist or a communist. It's about you and me. So they've drawn out their plan. They're building the infrastructure, and they're carrying it out in various ways. One example, they're using this trial of the arsonist who destroyed the Kimberly-Clark warehouse. They're testing out some of these theories. More than just arson. No, that's not good enough. We got to test these theories. Can we label him a terrorist because he voiced anti-capitalist sentiment, which is one of the main criteria laid out in the presidential security memo? Anti-capitalist ideas. The Department of Injustice has indicted the Southern Poverty Law Center. Decades and decades of laudable work fighting racism. And the current fascist orange regime charging the SPLC with unfairly going after the KKK. And the same Department of Injustice now targeting hundreds of citizens in a new push for denaturalization. Yeah, while we chase the daily headlines, these things are going on every day. All right, so let's talk about these warehouse fires, or at least the most high-profile one. Shamel Abdul Karim, a 29-year-old employee of NFI Industries, which was affiliated with Kimberly-Clark, worked in this massive warehouse. He's the suspect in this arson case, accused of destroying that Kimberly-Clark distribution center, damages exceeding $500 million. He was charged with federal arson crimes, allegedly posting social media videos of the act, and has pleaded not guilty. The fire occurred on April 7, 2026, destroying a 1.2 million square foot facility and its contents. Jesus. That's 25 football fields. That's hard to even picture. Now, as for the motivation, what you and I talked about, part of it is a, quote, hostility to capitalism and corporations, end quote. Well, no one could have more hostility to capitalism and corporations than I do. And that now is grounds for prosecution? Well, not alone. You have to commit some sort of crime. But then the very fact they can use hostility to capitalism and corporations concept as part of the charge? I guess that would be somewhat like hate crime laws. It's already a crime to kill somebody. But if there's evidence that the murder was motivated by hatred for a protected group or an intention to terrorize that protected group, then you can add on the hate crime element and it makes it a more serious charge, stiffer penalty. Abdul Karim faces up to 20 years in prison with further potential for a 10-year to life sentence on state charges. Every time there's an uprising, the George Floyd murder and its public response is the best example. There's property damage. And I've been pretty clear, I think, I tried to be, and very consistent, that I don't condone property damage. I also do not equate property damage with physical violence against people. I think they're miles apart. If the folks in a neighborhood have just had it up to their ears and start throwing bricks through the windows of the local hardware store, I'm not going to get all up in arms about that. Again, I don't condone it, but I'm not going to go out of my way to condemn these people. They've had it. As we've quoted here many times, Martin Luther King Jr. said, "A riot is the language of the unheard." I stand with that. So while I don't condone destruction of property, there's no way I'm going to equate that with physical violence against people. And that includes the physical violence that people face every day in the form of police brutality, harassment, poverty itself. Yeah, I'm not afraid to stretch the definition of violence a little bit past a punch in the nose. Living in poverty, walking unsafe streets, the systemic abuse that lays on a child, on a family, on anyone having to deal with that life, day in and day out. Yeah, I'm not afraid to call that violence. A brick through a storefront window? No, that's not violence. A torched warehouse? I don't call it violence. It's something, but they're not the same. There's a qualitative difference. And this Ontario, California warehouse is one of, I don't know how many now, at least a half a dozen. I know there are more similar incidents. This one got all the press, of course, because it was massive and because of the video that was released. And I equate these actions as kind of a slow-moving riot that's breaking out. People have had enough, and they're acting out. In the video, Abdul Karim can be heard repeatedly talking about low wages, especially. Some of the quotes from the video: "If you're not going to pay us enough to fucking live or afford to live, at least pay us enough not to do this shit." Another one: "You know, we may not get paid enough to fucking live, but these bitches," referring to the lighters, "but these bitches dirt cheap." And then the infamous quote: "All you had to do was pay us enough to live." Now, according to authorities, Abdul Karim has also expressed anti-corporate, anti-government, and anti-capitalist sentiments in social media posts, in texts. They hacked his phone, and they found him saying, quote, "They had it coming. F***ing 8 hours, 6 days, stuck paying rent on bullshit-ass apartment that I can't afford to f***ing live. Pedophiles out here f***ing children, profiting off f***ing wars." Yeah, this is a slow-moving riot from people who just can't take it anymore. Abdul Karim allegedly compared his actions to those of Luigi Mangione, the guy who shot United Healthcare CEO, who's getting lots of support. Hashtag Luigi was right is out there. In other texts and phone calls cited by the government, Abdul Karim said, quote, "1% is a f***ing joke. Billionaires profiting off war. All you had to do was pay us enough to live, pay us more of the value we bring, not corporate. Didn't see the shareholders picking up a shift." Yeah, this is pretty specific, isn't it? And this incident has struck a nerve among workers internationally because these statements really give expression to intense anger over poverty, wages, corporate greed, worsening work conditions. Now, I should credit my source for the article I'm using here, by Joshua Rodriguez of the World Socialist website. And Rodriguez goes out of his way to say that he does not condone the act of Abdul Karim, calls him politically confused, spends much of the latter half of this article condemning the act as wrong, and more importantly, inefficient. It's not going to work for the movement. Isolated actions of individuals who lash out at their employers and destroy property are politically bankrupt, he says, endanger other workers, and provide the authorities a pretext to expand state repression. I don't disagree. I think he's got that about right. But again, I'm not going to condemn. That just means we all have to work harder. We all have to work harder to change this damn world. Because, as Rodriguez points out, and I agree, what the capitalist class fears is that the widespread hostility to exploitation and social inequality will find conscious and organized expression throughout the working class. And this relates, of course, to what you and I have been talking about. First Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Central District of California, Bill Asalee, who I guess is on the case against Abdul Karim, said this, quote, "Look, America is founded on free enterprise and capitalism. Anyone who attacks our values, our way of life, our system, which provides the best goods and services to the most people, we're going to come after aggressively." So this is significant here. They are declaring class war. They're trying to establish in law a permanent precedent that will disallow alternative views on policies of economics and social justice. So the prosecution here is not simply responding to a criminal act, but as Rodriguez puts it, part of a broader effort to intimidate opposition to capitalism. We've known for a couple of decades now, the data is incontrovertible, that the great majority of domestic violence is coming from the far right, from racists, from neo-Confederates, from neo-Nazis. We know this. But this regime is turning that on its head. The 2026 Homeland Threat Assessment from the Department of Homeland Security says class-based or economic grievances are the most important motivations for what they call domestic terrorism. They are attempting to legally enforce ideology. If you're perceived as anti-government, if you're a little too enthusiastic about racial or ethnic equality, about LGBTQ rights, if you dare to say anything about Israel, if you dare to suggest that there might be a class problem in this country, those are all indicators, in black and white, in Project 2025, in the National Security Presidential Memorandum 7 of 2025, and then the ensuing Attorney General memo that puts it into operation throughout the federal government. Those are all indicators that you are suspect. And your most fundamental right, your freedom of speech, your freedom to think, is in jeopardy. Now, am I saying they should pat Abdul Karim on the back and just let him go? No, but they're showing their hand in how they're dealing with this. You know, we're tossing words around pretty carelessly. Fascism, authoritarianism. We need to just pause for a moment and really appreciate the depth of what we're talking about. Totalitarianism. They're attempting to embed totalitarianism into the very foundations of what was once a republic. They're planting these seeds deep into the soil. And if we win some debates and win some elections, and the polls look like they're in our favor, that's not going to do the job. We have to fight these ideas at the root. We can't afford to let them take hold. Another case where the American fascist regime is attempting to solidify their rule and eliminate all opponents. Southern Poverty Law Center, the latest to face trumped-up charges. They are charged by the Department of Injustice for allegedly paying informants to infiltrate extremist groups without disclosing payments to donors. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a member of any possible jury that may hear this case, so I'm not going to jump to the end. But from everything I'm reading, and there's plenty, this is just more of the same. A politically corrupt Department of Injustice, Acting Attorney General, and the Orange Menace's personal consigliere Todd Blanche, just going after a political enemy. And why are they a political enemy? Because they fight for civil rights? Because they go after racists? Yeah, I guess the SPLC in the past paid informants in their investigations against the Ku Klux Klan and Aryan nations and other groups. Also, right-wing religious organizations working tirelessly to reverse the gains of LGBTQ rights and harass them. SPLC has been around for many decades, fighting racism, fighting segregation, using the law, a fierce watchdog against the Klan and their ilk. So, honestly, I don't know if SPLC technically broke any rules or any laws. Just based on what I'm reading and based on the history of the Orange regime, I seriously doubt it. And let's assume for a moment that they did. Maybe they stepped out of bounds. Like I said, I don't know. The very fact that the Department of Injustice is prioritizing this effort, while they have squeezed the budget, eliminated personnel, in some cases outright extinguished Justice Department agencies with the mission of protecting gender rights, women's rights, people of color, underrepresented groups. No, the only discrimination now is reverse discrimination. That's the only kind of discrimination they care about. The Department of Justice itself was created for this very purpose. I didn't know this. I read recently, the DOJ, founded in 1870 under the Grant administration, to help suppress the Ku Klux Klan in the southern states and enforce federal civil rights protections for formerly enslaved Americans. That's the origin story of the DOJ. But in this fascist, Christian nationalist, white supremacist regime, everything is on its head. Anyone not on board is a target. This same Department of Injustice is now targeting hundreds of U.S. citizens in a new push for denaturalization. With the help of their oligarch tech buddies, they're using AI systems to track down anyone who might be a candidate. Now, there's always been in law a provision for denaturalization. You know those old black and white mobster movies where they're deporting gangsters? Yeah, if you're a bad guy, if you break the law, that'll happen occasionally. It's rare. Not so rare anymore. The Justice Department just announced 384 Americans whose citizenship it wants to revoke, assigning the cases to prosecutors in dozens of U.S. attorneys' offices across the country. This is completely and wildly out of the norm. It's the highest volume of denaturalization referrals in history. The average over many decades is about maybe 10 or 11 per year. They went after 120 people last year. So far this year, 384, claiming anywhere from minor run-ins with the law to suspected ties to the Communist Party, charging fraud of one kind or another. Yeah, I guess the Orange Menace knows a little bit about fraud. So this is what the DOJ and the U.S. Attorney's offices are now working on. Not making you safer. There's no such thing as white-collar crime anymore. That's just not being enforced. No such thing as civil rights crimes anymore, unless, again, they're aimed at white, straight men. This is just a complete distortion of law and another tool of the white supremacist, fascist, Christian nationalist regime. And now a proposed bill from House Republicans. They want to denaturalize U.S. citizens who, quote, advocate for socialism, including anyone who is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America or any affiliate group. Well, that includes a lot of people, including New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani. In fact, they're calling it the Mamdani Act. Republican Representative Chip Roy, a buddy of the Orange Menace, a leader in the far-right House so-called Freedom Caucus, he's introducing the bill that would radically expand the grounds for deporting, denying entry, and stripping the citizenship of anyone in the country based on their real or perceived politics or ideology. There it is. Okay, come and get me. I'm in Milwaukee. It's the tall building right next to the river. Come and get me. This is what they're doing. This is what they want to accomplish. The whole concept of mass deportation from Project 2025 and an arena full of signs at the Republican convention, promises from the podium, the greatest mass deportation of all time, the building of concentration camps, the build-up of a private army of ICE and DHS, all designed from the very beginning to deal with all undesirables, all political opponents. Already open demands from members of Congress to denaturalize and deport the likes of Zoran Mamdani, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, accusing them of, quote, hostile ideologies, fundamentally opposed to American values, making reference to Muslims or Islam or Sharia law. And they wonder why we call them fascists. And they tell us, oh, you must bring down the temperature. You know what would bring down the temperature? Democracy, economic justice, social justice. That would bring down the temperature. And now we have this ridiculous incident at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Nobody outside legacy media even believes it's real. Half of America thinks it was staged. I don't know whether it was or not. But if you're within the sound of my voice and you're thinking about taking him out, for the love of God, don't kill him. It would put rocket fuel in their movement. And it would cost our anti-fascist movement years. So please don't do it. Please don't kill him. Let him die on the toilet choking on a Big Mac, the way God intended. Bring down the temperature. Come on. What the hell did you expect? You elect a convicted criminal and rapist, committing war crimes on a daily basis, right in front of our eyes, dropping bombs and threatening to annihilate an entire civilization. What the hell did you expect? The Orange Menace and his maggots have, for all intents and purposes, declared half of the American population their sworn enemy. They call us sick. They call us animals. They call us vermin. They call us terrorists. What the hell do you expect? Now, I will never condone violence. I've said it 1,000 times. In the very same breath, I say, what the hell do you expect when you allow this abomination of a regime to wreak havoc on the country, on the Constitution, and on every speck of whatever decency we have left? No amount of security and no bomb-proof golden ballroom can stop a slow-rolling riot caused by day after day, year after year of this criminal administration endangering the entire globe, destroying our democratic system, abusing its citizens, and all the while enriching themselves by the billions. What the hell do you expect? So there have been 2 or 3 alleged assassination attempts. I'm surprised it doesn't happen 2 or 3 times a day. They are doing everything in their considerable power to transform this nation into a totalitarian state. That's not hyperbolic language, it's a simple fact. And we better get on with the business of destroying the regime and creating an alternative before these so-called lone wolves become an overwhelming pack in a slow-moving riot that we can no longer control. All right. This and all episodes can be heard at the website charlesburcell.com or on your favorite podcast platform. Find us on Substack and Blue Sky. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio in Milwaukee. Peter Donalds wrote and performed our theme song. Okay, I love you. I'll see you out there.